Chapter 5, The First Infernal Circle, or the Sphere of the Moon. My friends, gathered here once again, we are going to study the first Dantistic circle of the infernal worlds. It is indubitable that this first submerged region corresponds to Limbus, the Orcus of the classics mentioned by Virgil, the poet of Mantua. We have been told with total meridian clarity that said mineral zone is vividly represented by all the caverns of the world, which, united astrally, happen to complement the first submerged region. Dante, the Old Florentine, says that in said region he found all those innocents who died without having received the waters of baptism. All of this should be understood in a strictly symbolic M. If we carefully study the R, the sacred book of the Hindu, we can evince with mystical wonder the conclusive and definitive fact that the sacrament of baptism very much preceded the Christian era. In the Ramayana, we can verify the unusual case of Rama, who was definitely baptized by his guru. Unquestionably, in the olden times, no one received the baptismal water without first having been fully instructed in the mysteries of sex. The sacrament of baptism is, therefore, a pact of sexual magic. It is extraordinary that the sacrament of baptism was the first thing that one received upon entering any school of mysteries. It is indispensable, urgent, to transmute the pure waters of life into the wine of light of the alchemist. Only in this manner is it possible to achieve the inner self-realization of the being. In the Orcus of the classics, in the Limbo, we find many learned men who died without having received the waters of baptism. Sincerely mistaken people full of magnificent ideas, but mistaken people who thought liberation possible without the need for sexual magic. Therefore, in the first sublunar region, below the epidermis of this planet in which we live, the dead dwell in a cold and sepulchral manner. One feels true sadness, supreme pain upon contemplating so many millions of disembodied people wandering in the region of the dead with their consciousness asleep. You see them there like cold shadows with their consciousness profoundly asleep. Like specters of the night, the shadows of the dead come and go everywhere in the first Dantistic circle. They are engaged in the same activities of the life that was just lived. They dream with the memories of yesterday. They live in the past, totally. Question: you have explained to us, Master, that in the first subterranean sublunar region, called Limbo, dwell the souls of those who have not been baptized, understanding baptism to be a pact of sexual magic, which moves me to ask the following question. Do all beings who have not practiced sexual magic automatically enter this region upon dying? Answer: distinguished friend, your question is quite interesting, and I hasten to answer you. I would like you to comprehend that the first submerged region is like the anteroom of hell. Obviously, there dwell the shadows of our loved ones, millions of human beings who never transmuted the seminal waters into the wine of alchemy. Few are those essences, those souls, who really attain some vacations in the superior worlds after death. It is indubitable that the greater part of human beings return immediately into a new human organism, spending a period of time in limbo before re-embodying once again. However, due to the critical state in which we actually live, countless deceased persons become definitely submerged in the infernal worlds, passing through the tenebrous spheres of the moon, Mercury, Venus, the sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. The last of these regions is definitive. There, the lost ones undergo the final disintegration, the second death that is so indispensable. Thanks to this horrible neurahystionation, the essence, the soul manages to free itself from the region of the Tartarus, to ascend to the planetary surface, and to initiate, once again, a new evolution that inevitably needs to begin from the mineral kingdom. Question: how should one understand, Venerable Master, what is said in the language of the Roman Church? That the innocent children are the ones who enter limbo? Answer: distinguished friend. We need to understand this matter about the innocent children in a symbolic and allegorical form. Interpret the word innocent, not in its original pristine form, but rather as radical ignorance. Certainly, he who ignores the mysteries of sex is ignorant even if he boasts of being wise and possesses a vast erudition. Remember that there are many learned ignoramuses who not only ignore, but who also ignore that they ignore. Understood. Question: Master, do you mean to say that the person who has not fabricated his solar bodies has not been baptized? Answer: distinguished young man, your question makes me happy, which gives a basis for a beautiful explanation. The sacred scriptures speak clearly about the wedding garb of the soul, the to soma heliakon, the golden body of the solar man, the living representation of the supersensible bodies which every human creature should form. In our past books, we have already spoken about the creation of the existential bodies of the being, and I believe that our Gnostic students will be able to understand us because of that. It is indubitable that the intellectual animal, mistakenly called man, does not possess such vehicles, and therefore he should create them by working in the lit forge of Vulcan, sex. In these instances, the case of a friend who disembodied years ago comes to my memory. He was a convinced Gnostic, however. He did not manage to create his existential bodies of the being. This I was able evince in the region of the dead, limbo. Being out of the body, I found him. He had a gigantic aspect, and his face was certainly that of the Pantheon or cemetery. I walked around with him to different places, on different streets of the city, unquestionably, below the three-dimensional region of Euclid, in limbo. You are dead, I told him. What? Impossible. I am alive, such was his answer. As we passed near a regal mansion, I made him enter with the purpose of his looking at himself at the mirror. He obeyed my suggestion, and he then looked very surprised. Try to float, I continued, telling him in case. Take a hop so that you will convince yourself that you are dead. Obeying, that phantom tried to fly, but I saw him precipitate himself upside down instead of ascending like the birds. In those instants, he assumed different animal-like figures. You now have the shape of a horse, of a dog, of a cat, a tiger, I continued telling him as his different animal-like aspects stood out. Certainly that phantom was formed by a mass of quarrelsome and vociferous ease that penetrated and interpenetrated each other without becoming mixed up. My efforts were useless. That disembodied person was not able to understand me. He was a dweller of the region of the dead. A sum of eyes personifies psychological defects. Although that friend had known gnosis, he had not achieved the fabrication of his astral body. Now all that I had before my eyes was a mass of phantoms, giving the impression of a personality and appearance. It is obvious that that individual had not received the sacrament of baptism. In other words, we shall say that he had not transmuted the pure waters of life into the wine of the alchemists. Question: Master, does that mean to say that those who inhabit the region of the dead or limbo will always have the opportunity of returning to another womb? Answer: Distinguished friend, do not forget that the god Mercury, with his caduceus, always takes out the souls that are submerged in the Orcus, with the purpose of reincorporating them into a new organism. Only in this way is it possible for us to be truly baptized someday. Understood? Question, beloved master. I understand that the essence and the eyes of the deceased enter limbo, but that it is not a region of suffering. Am I correct? Answer: Distinguished gentlemen, since you speak of the essence and eyes, it is good that we put the cards on the table now to clarify concepts and to define doctrinal positions. Many believe that the ego, the I, the myself, oneself, is something too individual. This is how it is erroneously supposed by the multiple authors of modem psychology. We, the Gnostics, go farther. We like to go deeper, to delve into all of those mysteries, to inquire, to find out, etc. The I does not possess any individuality whatsoever. It is a sum of psychic aggregates which personify our psychological defects. A bunch of errors, passions, hatreds, fears, vendettas, jealousies, anger, lust, resentments, attachments, covetousness, etc. These diverse aggregates have various animal-like forms in the hypersensible regions of nature. When one dies, this entire mass of quarrelsome and vociferous I's, that entire gamut of varied psychic aggregates, continue beyond the sepulchre. Our spiritual essence, the psychic material, is imprisoned in such negative values. It is therefore ostensible that said spiritual material, engrossed in the ego, submerges itself into the orcus, in limbo, to return a little later to this physical world. Question: Master, for a run-of-the-mill person, would limbo be a continuation of his life? Okay, so I'm going to pause for a moment because recently I figured that the most impactful way to read out a Samael Aun Weor book aloud is to have Samael read it to us himself. So I'd like to welcome in our new narrator, Venerable Master Samael Aun Weor.
Greetings all. I will now continue the audiobook from here on. Now, young friend that asks the question, I consider that you are a little mistaken. It is necessary to pose a better question to clarify. There is no tomorrow for the personality of the dead. Every personality is a child of its time, is born in its time, and dies in its time. That which continues beyond the sepulchre is the ego, the sum of diverse, brutal, animal-like psychic aggregates. When I contemplated my friend in the story, with pain I was able to understand that his personality had been annihilated. All that I had before my eyes was a sum of grotesque animal-like figures, penetrating and interpenetrating each other mutually to give a false appearance of a sepulchral, cold and spectral personality. What had become of my friend? Where was he? Since he had not fabricated the astral body, it is obvious that he had ceased to exist. If my friend had fabricated an astral body by means of sexual transmutation, if he had really practiced sexual magic, it is clear that he would have fabricated the sidereal vehicle, and he would then have been able to continue with his astral personality in the hypersensible regions of nature. Unfortunately, this had not been the case. To be baptized then implies having practiced sexual magic. Whoever has not proceeded in this manner has not received the sacramental waters. He is an inhabitant of limbo. Question: Master, could this false personality, formed by those grotesque eyes that was once your friend, become your enemy in that region without a future? Answer: Young friend, it is urgent for you to comprehend that the ego is constituted by many I, and that some of them can be our friends or our enemies. Indubitably, some I's of that phantom that I have referred to continue being my friends, but others, it is obvious, can be enemies, or simply grotesque, indifferent phantoms. Anyway, it is the ego that returns from the region of limbo to repeat all the painful dramas of past existences in this physical world. The personality, as I already said, is perishable, does not ever return, and this is something that you should comprehend clearly. Learn to differentiate between the ego and the personality. Do you understand? Question: Master, should I understand that the true sacrament of baptism can only be received by one who becomes initiated on the path of the razor's edge? Distinguished sir, the authentic sacrament of baptism, as I already said in this talk, is a pact of sexual magic. Unfortunately, people go through the baptismal ceremony, through the rite, but they never fulfill the pact. That is why they enter limbo. If people fulfilled that religious pact, they would fully enter the path of the razor's edge, that path mentioned by Christ when he said, "Narrow and straight is the path that leads to light, and very few are those who find it." It is indispensable to know that the secret path, which leads the souls to the final liberation, is absolutely sexual. Question. Master, therefore are the disembodied ones that have begun to practice sexual magic the ones who have the right to some vacations? Answer. Distinguished lady who asks the question, I invite you to comprehend that the ego can never enter the celestial regions. The only thing which exists for the psychic aggregates is the second death. Is that understood? However, we will go deeper to elucidate and clarify in this talk. When the ego is not too strong, when the psychic aggregates are very weak, the pure essence, the soul, manages to free itself for some time to enter the celestial regions and enjoy a vacation before returning to this valley of tears. Unfortunately, nowadays, the animal ego has become very strong in many people, and due to that, human souls no longer have the happiness of such vacations. Certainly nowadays, very rare are those souls who succeed in entering the devolution, as the theosophists say, or in the causal world. I want that all they understand the concrete fact that those souls, today, by the way, very rare, that they can enjoy by a time so happy, vacations between the death and the new birth, are what we could call in the world very good people. Due to this, the great law compensates to them after the death. Understood? Question. Master, upon re-entering a womb, do those souls who manage to escape the ego to enjoy some vacations have to once again become imprisoned in the ego? Answer. Friends, the ego can only be destroyed, annihilated in two ways. First, through the conscious work on ourselves and within ourselves, here and now. Secondly, in the infernal worlds, through submerged involution, going through horrible suffering. Unquestionably, the celestial vacations do not dissolve the ego. Once the essence, the soul, exhausts the fruits of his reward, upon returning to this valley of tears, it will have to remain bottled up in its ego, the I, the myself. Question. Master, when the essence returns to a new womb imprisoned in the ego after its vacations, doesn't it bring the aspiration to free itself to achieve self-realization? Answer. Distinguished lady, your question is magnificent. In an emphatic way, I want to tell you the following. The ascent to the superior worlds comforts and helps us. When the essence returns from vacations in the superior worlds of cosmic consciousness, it comes fortified and with greater enthusiasm. Then it struggles untiringly to attain its total liberation. However, every effort would be useless if it did not fulfill the pact of sexual magic contained in the sacrament of baptism. Question. Master, can you tell us how the regions of the first Dantestic circle or of the moon are, how one lives, and what is done there? Answer. I immediately proceed to answer the gentleman who asked the question. The first Dantestic sublunar circle, represented by all the caverns of the earth, seen internally, is very interesting. There we find the first submerged counterpart of our cities, streets, villages, counties, and regions. It is not surprising that a life similar to this one is lived. In no way should we be astonished by the fact that the deceased visit the houses where they lived or wander around in the same places that they knew before, occupying themselves in the same trades or jobs that they used to have. I remember the pathetic case of a poor carrier of heavy bundles. After his death, his ego went around carrying a load, package, or bundle on his back. When I tried to make him comprehend his situation, when I tried to make him understand that he was already very dead and that he had no reason to go around carrying heavy bundles on his body, he looked at me with the eyes of a somnambulist. His consciousness was asleep. He was incapable of comprehending me. Deceased persons continue selling in their stores or buying merchandise or driving automobiles, etc., each in those tasks in which he was occupied before. It is very astonishing to see those bars full of disembodied drunkards, those houses of prostitutes still fornicating after death, etc. Question: Master, what is the process followed by those who inhabit limbo to return to this three-dimensional world? Answer: those who dwell in limb should recapitulate the life that they just went through, relive it slowly. Once such a retrospective process is concluded, all the actions of our previous life are simply reduced to mathematics. Then the judges of karma make us return to this valley of tears, for the purpose of we making amends for our errors, and so that we will look for the path that will lead us to the final liberation. That is all.